Well, good morning. I'm Jessica Dooley, Technology Project Manager at OPLIN, and this is Cybersecurity Planning from Scratch, Understanding ORC 9.64 for Public Libraries. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you being here today. These are my colleagues at OPLIN. The Ohio Public Library Information Network is the internet service provider for Ohio's public libraries. Our mission, defined in the Ohio Revised Code, is to ensure equity of access to digital information for all residents of Ohio. In support of that mission, we offer libraries a number of technology services, and you can find more information about those on our website. So today, I'd like to introduce the concepts of cybersecurity planning, define security terms, review what the new Ohio Revised Code Section 9.64 says, and share some resources that may be of value to you and to your library in creating a security program for the first time. So this discussion is for any public library that is evaluating your existing security controls and making a plan to be compliant with the newly created ORC 9.64, but I particularly want to provide some non-technical guidance for libraries that are creating a cybersecurity program or dealing with the concepts of security for the first time. There are many extensive guides that are available to work on security planning, but many of those resources assume that you have a frame of reference for technical controls in IT or a background in security. So if your library has not yet addressed these concepts or doesn't yet have a security policy, this talk is for you. I'll focus on introducing the administrative role of governance in security preparation and frame this new ORC 9.64 in a public library context. I am not a lawyer and I can't give you legal advice, but what I can do is define specific security terms used in ORC section 9.64 and offer some interpretation of the security concepts that it addresses. Cybersecurity is a distinct area of technical discipline, and just like any other profession, it has terms with specific technical meanings. So in summary, here's what's included in that section. But let's start with why we're talking about this now. So the Ohio Revised Code Section 9.64 was signed into law in House Bill 96 on June 30th, 2025, and went into effect on September 30th. In summary, it has 6 divisions that define the terms used. It restricts local government entities from paying or complying with ransom demands. It requires local government to adopt a cybersecurity program. It creates mandatory reporting requirements for security incident, and it exempts all the records of security programs, incidents, and the procurement of security resources from public records requests. Some of these provisions are in effect now. Other provisions, especially the requirement to adopt a security program, will take effect for public libraries on July 1st, 2026. So let's start with Division C, which requires libraries to adopt a security program consistent with recognized standards of best practice. Let's review what this section says. The initial paragraph has multiple security terms to unpack. So yellow I've noted for intent, and green are security terms that I'd like to define. So political subdivision, that is your library, the legislative authorities, the library's board of trustees, shall adopt, so this provision is mandatory, it's not optional, a cybersecurity program. This term is very intentional, and we'll discuss what that requires in a moment, that safeguards the political subdivision's data, information technology, and information technology resources to ensure availability, confidentiality, and integrity. Those descriptors were not chosen at random. They have a specific meaning in this context. It goes on to mandate that your program shall be, again, mandatory, consistent with generally accepted best practices for cybersecurity, such as, and then it names 2 frameworks, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework and the CIS Cybersecurity Best Practices. And then finally, it offers a more flexible, may include, but are not limited to, list of elements that your program should address. So let's start by defining a couple of those terms. What is a cybersecurity program? A program is more than a policy. A cybersecurity program is a combination of a policy, which is a document, with an action plan and a commitment to continuous improvement. So a cybersecurity program involves regularly assessing your security controls, your assets that are to be protected, and your policy document, and revising your policy and your action plan to best protect your organization's assets and your evolving needs. So a policy might be a document you adopt with a board motion, but a program, which is required by this law, requires you to take action and to keep taking action over time. So this task, creating a cybersecurity program, this cannot be done in one session. This is not a set it and forget it type of situation. This is something you'll incorporate into both your schedule and your core organizational priorities going forward. The ORC language says that your program must safeguard the data, information technology, and IT resources of your library. That means your action plan needs to cover more than just IT. A cybersecurity program also needs to address all of your business critical information, processes, and people, all of your assets that your library depends on to fulfill your mission and provide service to the public. IT is foundational. Those technical controls are core and probably by far the biggest part of a security program. But before you even address technical controls and best practices, you must first identify what are all of your business critical resources and address how to protect them. So to ensure the availability, confidentiality, and integrity. So that phrase refers to a specific security concept called the CIA triad. This is a mental model, and it represents how to think about what security is. The reason that this is important and useful is that humans are bad at threat modeling. Our gut feeling is useful for many things, but statistical analysis is not one of them. If you try to anticipate all the possible threats that your organization might encounter, you would never be able to successfully enumerate them all. So instead, the CIA triad looks at the concept, what does it mean for something to be secure? In any given scenario, security means that the asset, whatever the thing is, whether it's IT, whether it's data, whether it's a process, has the appropriate and intended level of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Specifically, that means that asset should only be accessible to those authorized. It should be protected from unauthorized modification, and it should be available to those authorized when it's needed. You can use this as a mental model to help you assess the risks and the criticality or importance of those risks to your library's assets. Is it a big deal if your website isn't confidential? No, it's supposed to be public. Is it a big deal if your employee HR records, including social security numbers, aren't confidential? Yes, that's not good. And there's legal liability attached to that exposure. So, you would apply these concepts to any asset that you're classifying in your plan. If you do not know the answer, in most cases, I would predict that given any given resource that you ask yourself this question about, you'll probably know the answer pretty readily. And if not, make a note of that. You've identified an area for further research. So now that we have this context, if we glance back at the very first part of ORC 9.64 to Division A1, the definition of cybersecurity incidents makes good sense. An incident is a substantial loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability of an entity's information system or network, so your IT assets, a serious impact on the safety and resiliency of your operational systems and processes. Again, this refers to things beyond IT, or a disruption of your ability to engage in your operations or deliver your services. So you're looking at the whole security picture in addressing your program. Finally, do not sleep on this. I think this is really useful to keep in mind. If a third-party provider or a cloud provider or a third-party host suffers a security incident that impacts your data or the services that you receive from them, these requirements apply to that too. So just because that breach was not your fault or your responsibility, if there is a security incident to a third party that you pay for services, the provisions of this section will apply. Finally, it specifies very helpfully that threats without impact do not constitute an incident. So the next statement in ORC 9.64 specifies two cybersecurity frameworks. Programs shall be consistent with generally accepted best practices for cybersecurity, such as, then it names two. So what are cybersecurity frameworks? Essentially, these are guides to what should go in your cybersecurity program. Cybersecurity frameworks define a list of concepts and priorities, but they don't prescribe any specific action. Instead, they're meant to be scalable to any size of organization with an infinite variety of resources, budget, and security needs. These two frameworks are two ways of articulating the same information slightly differently. They are guides, but they're not hard and fast mandates. They're both useful definitions of what risk is, what your responsibility is as an agency to protect against security risks, and how to go about identifying the risks, preventing, defending against them, and recovering from security incidents. So let's glance at these briefly. The NIST, or National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework 2.0, is organized into 6 functions. These are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And organizing that whole process is the 6th function called govern. So governance is your responsibility. You as the library administrator or the IT person responsible for planning. Governance is what you're working on now by planning a cybersecurity program. In order to have that cybersecurity plan, you first have to put your planning in the organizational context in order to identify what's important, decide on a risk management strategy, and determine roles and responsibilities and develop what your policy and procedures will be. So the other 5 functions involve a mix of technical controls and implementing procedures, but governance is the irreducible minimum. It's that first step. Before you can act, you have to inventory, plan, and decide on priorities, roles, responsibilities, and a course of action. So the other cybersecurity framework mentioned is the Center for Internet Security's 18 critical security controls. These are essentially the same security best practices, but organized into 18 tasks or categories. CIS further subdivides them into 3 maturity tiers appropriate to the size of the organization. So a small organization starting a security program for the first time will likely want to look at implementation group 1. CIS provides several excellent tools for exploring detailed recommendations about how to implement these controls, including the CIS Controls Navigator and the Self-Assessment Tool. It's important to note that the NIST CSF and the CIS controls are covering the same best practices, just organized and stated in different ways. It's not an either-or decision. You don't have to stick to one framework unless you want to. You could draw guidance from both of them or either, depending on what you find most useful. So now that we've reviewed the frameworks and the terms and definitions, let's look again at what our cybersecurity plan may include, but is not limited to, according to Division C. And immediately some language jumps out: identify, detect, contain, repair. The language about what to include in your cybersecurity program closely aligns with the NIST CSF framework functions of identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. So if you adopt either cybersecurity framework that are recommended or a blend of both of them, you'll eventually hit on each of these functions as you develop your plan. Many of us, I really believe many libraries have substantial components of a cybersecurity program in place already. The most common functions that folks already have in place, even without, necessarily documenting it as this, is the protect function, which isn't even mentioned here. I think that omission is really telling. So most organizations with managed IT, or, I don't mean external IT, but any well-managed IT, have technical security controls. And the more mature our IT is, the more technical security controls in that protect category we already have in place. I think that this list, what ORC 9.64 has prioritized, is calling attention to the areas where we might be lacking in preparation. The whole business asset identification and risk classification, and incident response and recovery preparation. It further states that this is basically a list of recommendations. It may include, but are not limited to, right? That's good. It's articulating a goal, but it indicates you have some flexibility in how you accomplish this. So again, that's not legal advice from me. That is consistent with the published guidance from the Auditor of State and Cyber Ohio. The intent here is to provide your organization with the flexibility to determine what belongs in your security plan based on your resources, your assets, and your organization's needs. So we've defined some terms. Let us look at some resources and some questions around compliance, and then address where to start, what to put in your first security plan, and explore some resources that are available to help you in that process. So let's quickly cover the 4 other divisions that we haven't addressed yet. These are comparatively straightforward, and they address some things either to do or not to do. Division B states that you must not comply with ransom demands unless your board formally approves and specifies why it's in the library's best interest. So big picture here, I think organizations pay ransom demands or comply with demands for 2 reasons. One would be if they just really do not have the preparation in place to recover. And so they're hoping that by paying the ransom that they will, their infrastructure will be decrypted and go back to the way it was. The other reason is usually to avoid embarrassment or just that reputational harm of having it be publicly known that they are suffering from this incident. So I think this law is intended to strongly de-incentivize any local government entity from ever paying a ransom, because that's certainly what the state would prefer. So it's removing one of those 2 incentives. You cannot privately pay a ransom. You're going to have a formal board resolution saying we're going to pay the ransom and here's why, and justify that. So I think the only carve out here is a potential permission for an agency, maybe say, for instance, a hospital or a water treatment plant where human life and safety is going to be strongly impacted unless they recover very quickly. And maybe, unfortunately, they're just not in a position to recover well quickly. There is a legal loophole for them to pay that ransom. My takeaway from this would be, don't plan to pay ransom. Just do not do it if you can possibly help it. And then, of course, back in Division A.3, it defines the scope of a ransomware incident. Next, it creates mandatory reporting requirements. So why and what's going on here? There are 2 different groups to which you will be required to report cybersecurity incident should you suffer one. One is the Auditor of State, and that is because they are the compliance arm that will enforce this law. And the other is Ohio Homeland Security. So these two groups have different priorities and different reasons for requiring mandatory reporting. The Auditor of State is about compliance, right? Ohio Homeland, it's because they're seeking good data, basically. They're not really wanting to get all up in your business, but they want some hard and fast data about how many times Ohio local government entities are facing a cybersecurity incident and what types. That helps them with planning. That helps them have some data to support their recommendations to the legislature about funding for security initiatives. So it's really just about information, gathering. Luckily, both of these groups have published some very clear guidance on how to comply with this requirement. So within 7 days, you must report incidents once you discover them to, then let's cover these acronyms. DPS, that's the Department of Public Safety, large Ohio division. Within it, it has the Division of Ohio Homeland Security. Ohio Homeland Security has created the Ohio Cyber Integration Center, which they call OKIC. The intention of that group is to provide services similar to the federal agency CISA, right? The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. But the OKIC will essentially form that role for the state of Ohio internally. So OHS has published some great guidance detailing the reporting process, what you're going to need to tell them, and defining reportable incidents. I'd really bring this to your attention because they give very specific examples of what to report and what not to report, which is very, very helpful in clarifying. They also have this PDF, just a short document explaining exactly what questions they're going to ask. Print that out, keep it in hard copy in your incident response plan. And then within 30 days, report incidents to the Ohio Auditor State. They've also published some compliance guidance, including examples. Really recommend that you compare this guidance from these two groups because of their different priorities and roles, they actually care about different things. And for instance, the Auditor State will care very, very much if you suffer from financial loss due to a payment fraud sort of incident. While the Ohio Cyber Integration Center, they're not concerned about that at all because the incident was due to social engineering rather than to the lapse of some technical control. So the Auditor of State has a short cybersecurity reporting form. Again, I'd recommend keeping that in your incident response plan. And then finally, the final two divisions, E and F, specify that the records of your cybersecurity program, what's in it, the plan itself, the incident reports, and any security product procurement records are exempt from public records requests. They should not be published, they should not go on your website, and they should not be made available in response to public records requests. So finally, what do we do with this information? We've spent quite a bit of time on defining terms. I think it would be worthwhile to dig into some practical application. What do you do if you're starting from scratch with this task of planning security program? The very first step for an organization of any size, all the way down to the very smallest, is basically the component of identify and address the critical functions and cybersecurity risks of your library organization. This is essentially taking an inventory of your critical business data. So what belongs on this list? Anything that's critical to any aspect of the library operating and fulfilling its mission. So this list on this slide is not comprehensive. This is just a memo to spur you thinking about that question. Taking an inventory of your business critical data is foundational. You need to know what you have in order to identify your risks so you can prioritize your resources for protecting them. Taking this inventory is not a task that you can delegate, and it is not a task that you can outsource. Do this first before committing any financial resources or deciding on your technical controls. So just by making this detailed list, you're working on step 1 of the items enumerated in Division C, and you're making progress on both the govern and identify functions in the NIST cybersecurity framework. Every organization of any size must do this, and only you, the designated administrator or agent of the library, can do it. No consultant, no contractor, no MSP, no incident response team, no assistant from cybersecurity insurance policy. Nobody can restore information that you did not first document. So it's incredibly common for critical business data to be completely lost, especially at smaller organizations where one person may have multiple roles, because as humans, it's just so easy and natural for us to keep some business critical information in our heads. But then we retire, we move away, we're no longer available to the organization, and nobody else has any way to find that information out. So it is your responsibility to determine who is the data owner, whose role is it to know a certain type of information in the organization, and then work with that person to fully document and keep track of the information in a secure way. So where do you start? You're making this list. As you're making the list, this inventory of business critical assets, you can conduct an initial risk assessment by just mentally applying the CIA triad to each asset. What would happen if there was a loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability for each of the items on your list? Asking and answering that question will rapidly help priorities emerge. It'll help you identify a criticality or a hierarchy of what is most sensitive, what is most important, where would the risk be most critical in assessing the library's operations. And that'll help you prioritize allocating resources in your security planning. Be sure you store each type of data in an appropriate way. So passwords, for example, do not belong in a spreadsheet or a memo or an email or in OneDrive. They belong in a password manager. If you're not in a position to select or purchase a subscription product, you can use an open source free password manager like KeePass. That's absolutely fine. And be aware as you're gathering and documenting this information, be aware of your library's legal obligations. So again, I can't give you legal advice, but I can direct your attention to the existing Ohio Revised Code section governing library records and the Ohio Library Council. They are your source for private legal advice for public libraries. They identify some standards that you can follow in their standards for public library service in Ohio. That's a download that you can access through OLC's member hub. Keep in mind other scenarios where other data governance standards might apply. Fortunately for us as public libraries, we're not handling many types of sensitive information, and we're very aware of patron privacy. But keep in mind as any situation where something like PCI DSS might apply, like accepting credit card payments from patrons, or do you purchase a product from a vendor that invites patrons to store their payment information for reuse? And keep in mind, where that critical information is and what the risks associated with it might be. Okay, so you've gathered a good deal of information. You've done a first pass at identifying some priorities. Next, you, the person tasked with creating this program, want to familiarize yourself with some security concepts and best practices. So even if you're going to outsource a significant amount of, or even all of the technical controls, you really need to be, at least on the broad level, aware of what the concepts are, what the priorities are, what the steps are involved in security planning and in technical controls, just so that you'll be in the best position to make decisions and to make good decisions about what to include in both your policy and your plan, and how to assess whether a service or a product is necessary for your library. If you are starting at square one, I think these three sort of concise introductory resources will give you a great start. The Cybersecurity Frontline First Aid Kit was developed by the Ohio Cyber Range Institute through the folks that are setting up the Ohio Persistent Cyber Improvement Project. It's a self-paced online learning module. It's, you sign up, you create a free account, you can engage with the content over multiple sessions, maybe 2-3 hours of content. It discusses security concepts in an accessible, straightforward way. It introduces best practices and the technical controls that might align with them. This is suitable for anybody. The NIST CSF has a huge amount of resources, especially if you are a small organization. I would really call to your attention their Business Quick Start Guide. This includes specific, actionable how-to information for very small organizations that are starting a security program from scratch. It has basically planning questions and action steps. It has 1 page for each of the 6 NIST CSF functions. And on each of those pages, it asks some questions and provides some example steps or tasks or priorities for how to address applying that function within your organization. So a really good, big picture overview of what goes in your security plan. And then finally, a similar resource, just organized and expressed differently, this could be useful for even medium-sized organizations, I believe, is the CISA Cyber Essentials Toolkit. So this is a series of 6 two-page PDFs that introduce actionable tasks for both administrators and IT staff for implementing security controls. It starts with planning and then moves through the security process of maturing the organization's security around both business and IT assets. I think it's really useful just to look at all of these frameworks, CIS and NIST and CISA, because as you look at these different guides, they're all talking about the same thing. And just reading, different approaches to the same priorities will help them crystallize in your mind, and you'll begin to take these concepts on board and be able to reuse them when you need them. So where do you start? You've become familiar with planning, you've made a business critical asset inventory, and you've assessed, what is the most critical, where are your risks? What do you do if you're really starting from zero and you need to stand up an initial cybersecurity program? Think of this as sort of a to-do list, especially for smaller organizations. You do not already have a plan. First of all, we've already covered this, your inventory. What are those accounts? Do you have record of the credentials? What types of data are you responsible for? Who are all your third-party providers? Who do you have contracts with? Do you actually have the contact information for all of these folks stored in a maintainable manner? Identify who within the organization is going to take on what role and what responsibility. Who are the data owners? In a very small library, it might just be the director, but in any organization, if you have any IT staff, they're going to be a data owner for the entire IT technical controls function. You might have a fiscal officer. Review those resources that are free and short, the CFFAK, the NIST CSF Quick Start Guide, to become familiar with concepts. Determine who you'll call in an emergency. Who is going to help you as your first responder? And in addition to that, other contacts that you might need to reach out to, your providers, your partners, your staff, those 2 mandatory reporting guides. Keep all of that contact information in hard copy. Well, why should you do that? Typically, we keep contact information in our email or in our business platform. If you have a very severe cybersecurity incident, you're not going to have access to that, right? So you need a hard copy for your incident response plan. I put this on this list because this is also, even though this is a technical control, only you can do this for yourself, right? So enable multi-factor authentication and select long, unique passwords for each account. So if obviously your IT provider can help with deploying this in a managed organization, but if you have individual accounts to things like things that store payment information, financial tools, your email, administrator accounts for any type of business platforms, your domain name registrar. You want to be protecting those critical accounts where a loss of the account or a disruption of the account seriously impact your business. Every account needs to have a unique password. You need to keep it in a password manager, and you need to enable multi-factor authentication. That does not mean that you have to use a smartphone app. You could absolutely buy a FIDO2 authenticator key like a YubiKey. Keep that on your keychain and use that as your MFA token. I've really placed an asterisk next to this because it is so valuable to you. And it's not a technical control, it's a people control. So adopt a written procedure to protect the organization against payment fraud. This is something the Auditor of State really emphasizes and requires your organization to do. The importance of this is it is not reasonable to expect people to never be fooled, right? Social engineering, whether it comes through an email or a phone call, it's a very powerful attack. It's the attack of lying to you in order to cause you to help somebody else steal from you. It's very unrealistic to only have security awareness training as your only control in this area, right? Very renowned cybersecurity experts have published on their personal platforms about times when they were tricked and taken in by social engineering, and that is not your fault. So that's my bottom line on this. Don't expect, don't just tell the staff, hey, don't be fooled, and then it's your fault if you are fooled, because it's not actually realistic. You can better protect your organization and protect your own staff by having a written procedure. Think of this as MFA for your brain, right? Make a two-step verification process for any task that requires changing or updating the payment information or the remit to address or the contact information for somebody that's going to be receiving money from you. And that also helps because social engineering loves to play on our desire to be helpful, right? And to be efficient in completing our tasks. So that's another way people are fooled by payment fraud scams is we assume we're doing the right thing. So just by implementing a procedure and letting staff know, training on that, saying always do these steps, that will significantly reduce your risk of losing money to one of these scams. And it will also let staff know, hey, I don't have to feel bad, in the 99% of all interactions where I'm actually dealing with a trusted service provider, I'm just following this procedure, politely, correctly, and making sure that both of us are protected from financial loss. Okay, so again, this is an administrative or governance control that only you can do for your organization. Create a written incident response plan. It needs to identify roles and responsibilities, procedures. It needs to have that partner contact info, whether it's your external IT service provider or your ILS host or anyone you need to notify. Keep the mandatory reporting information in there. Review this plan regularly. The plan doesn't do any good if only you have seen it and it's in the drawer and it's 3 years old, right? Everybody with a role or responsibility needs to go over this, make it a meeting, orderly perhaps, and sort of rehearse it, even if it's just verbally, so that it'll be of most use to you when it's an emergency and you need it. Whoever does your IT, whether they're internal or whether you have a managed service provider, make them your ally. They're invested in your success and they are the appropriate person to advise you on your technical controls. Work with them to make a list of all your existing IT assets and security controls. And there are things that you can do with what you already have before you make any type of purchasing decision. You can apply secure configurations, basically, taking what you already have and hardening the configuration to reduce the vulnerable surface. You can employ compensating controls. Say you have a very old server, it's past end of life, it's no longer receiving security updates, but for some reason, you cannot immediately replace it with a supported device. There are compensating controls that you can apply, such as, isolating within your network, applying outbound as well as inbound firewall rules, disabling any feature that is known to have a vulnerability. These are just some examples. And finally, limiting administrative privileges. Administrative privileges, this word again is a technical meaning. It's not equivalent to, oh, I am an administrator, therefore I need administrative privileges. No, right? Administrative privileges just means the ability to change settings or change configuration in equipment. And those type of accounts should only be used for those tasks. Everybody, including the person whose role it is to have administrative privileges, should be using an unprivileged account for their daily use. Okay, so you've done a great many things at this point. This is a couple of months of work at least. You're now in the position to draft an initial security plan based on your existing resources and controls. At the same time, you're going to have identified a lot of things that are not done yet, right? So while you're working on it, make a list of goals and identify controls to implement in future years. So what goes in that initial cybersecurity program? Have your initial plan, your initial program reflect your existing security controls. right? So there is no one size fits all plan. You must develop a plan that fits your organization's needs and resources. So even though there's no universal plan, there is a universal set of security priorities, and those are reflected by those cybersecurity frameworks. You can use them to guide you in establishing goals and priorities. And keep in mind that the actual controls you select are flexible. They're flexible to fit our industry. They're flexible to fit the assets you have. And they're flexible to fit the resources that you're able to devote to it based on your size and budget, right? In Ohio, we have libraries with like 970 staff and libraries with 2 staff. These organizations have equivalent missions, but they do not have equivalent needs or resources or budget. However, both of the sizes of those 2 extremes are able to use the frameworks as a starting point, and you'd be able to express their plans, even though their plans might be vastly different in scale and scope. You could still describe them by using those frameworks. So even if you do not have a plan in place, a written document or a policy, you likely have some security controls. Make a list of those. Make a list of everything that you're able to commit to right now. Okay, I'm going to commit to making sure all of our critical accounts have unique passwords and that multi-factor authentication is enabled. Whatever it is, make a list of what you're doing now, and also make a separate parallel list of what you're going to prioritize doing in the future. Those are going to be your first plan, the plan that you adopt now, and they're going to be your action plan of what to bring into your plan over time as you're able to implement them. Prioritize by reviewing the minimum recommended controls in ORC 9.64. Again, identify and address functions and risks, identify the potential impacts of a breach. You can review this. Use this to prioritize, remind yourself what your plan needs to address. So what you're doing now goes in this year's plan, right? Document your capabilities, review, you've got to create a policy, review that in an executive session, right? Because the document is not going to be a public record. The board can adopt the policy. And then finally, you're going to have an action plan to grow into and continuously improve, revise, and add to your security controls and work towards that over time. I would recommend, one approach that you could take, what I'd probably do is have a policy document that addresses specific categories and refers to a procedure document. And then that procedure can be updated at will without a further board motion, right? So the procedure might say, we are doing X and Y. Then in 6 months, you can add, hey, we're doing X, Y, and Z as of this date. And then, 6 months farther on, hey, we've added A and B as of this date. And then your policy overall remains static, but it refers to this procedure that keeps growing as you mature and as you add capabilities, right? Explore your existing controls and explore free resources and funding opportunities that you can use to expand your capabilities. We'll address those in a moment. Okay, so what are some of these handy resources that you can make use of in your planning? We've already addressed the Cybersecurity Frontline First Aid Kit. Another NIST CSF document worth noting is a resource and overview guide. This is an accessible summary of the goals that fall within each function, and also embedded within this 8-page document are links to a great many other resources that may be of use to you in planning. The NIST National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence puts out some really good work. This white paper, Protecting Data from Ransomware, is a fantastic document that just discusses the whole concept of how to design and implement a mature backup strategy. This is a fantastic short document. I would recommend that you share it with your IT staff or your managed service provider. It talks about planning and scoping and implementing backups that will, help you be resilient against ransomware attacks. Cannot recommend this highly enough. And then finally from CIS, a couple of tools that helps you sort of digest what those 18 controls mean. The Navigator is a website that just allows you to dynamically select, hey, we want to look at, the starter policy implementation group 1, and then we want to select maybe the NIST CSF for comparison, and then it will generate a sort of a matrix of little tooltips that you can expand to view the CIS control, what would be included in implementation group 1 of that control, and how that compares to tasks that, the way NIST CSF describes them. And then the self-assessment tool. I'm emphasizing this one because this is an awesome tool to help you sort of self-audit or really make documentation easy and accessible. If you are working with any type of third party, or even just multiple people within your IT team who are responsible for different technical controls, or maybe the director, the fiscal officer, and IT are going to work together. This self-assessment tool is a free online web portal. You create a private account for your organization, you add other users, and then it breaks down the CIS controls into those 3 maturity tiers, those implementation groups, and then it enumerates all of the controls, tasks that might be under that control, and then it invites you to keep records, attach your policy, attach a record of when that control was implemented. This is just a very, very useful tool for keeping track of your progress and self-assessment over time. Policy building resources. So a lot of people have asked, oh, I'd like to see a sample policy. Here are some that have been prepared by these best practices organizations. The Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center has a NIST Cybersecurity Framework Policy Template Guide. So this PDF is actually just like a table of contents for the topics of security planning, within which it has embedded links to Word documents that are like a policy template. So organized, by the 6 functions of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. This could be a really useful resource if you'd like to review some sample policies and some language of what you might put in a policy. Another similar document, the CIS policy templates from the Center for Internet Security. These templates are a little bit different because the document itself includes guidance and a sort of context, as well as that sample language for the whole topic. And they just focus on implementation group 1 in these policy templates. Again, I would strongly advise that you do not just copy and paste and adopt any of these policies, right? The reason is because you will be accountable for whatever is in your policy. And that's not coming from me. That's from the published guidance from the Auditor of State. They're going to focus their audits by first asking, hey, let us see your cybersecurity program, your plan, the private details. And then they're going to ask you, have you done these things, right? So don't adopt an aspirational policy. Adopt a policy that reflects what your capability is now, and then review and update it annually or even oftener as your capability matures. And then if you'd like to just see a really mature policy from the state of Ohio, keep in mind, of course, the state of Ohio's policy does not apply to you, right? Because you are an independent political subdivision governed by your board. But you can view the public-facing parts of the state of Ohio Department of Administrative Services security guidance documents online. So they might be valuable for comparison. Interestingly, you'll note that policies that have sensitive security information are not a public record. So they might be listed, but not accessible. What about funding? So here's some funding resources. Ohio Persistent Cyber Improvement. I'm listing this under funding just because while no money is involved at all here, this is something that you would pay a great deal of money for if you were obtaining it from, a commercial organization. So Ohio Persistent Cyber Improvement is a project that the state of Ohio used their first round of CISA grant funding for. They have established a team that's working out of the University of Cincinnati, the Ohio Cyber Range Institute. They've created their own cybersecurity training curriculum and a project to involve the Ohio Cyber Reserve, which are essentially that's a form of a National Guard service for security industry professionals to use their security expertise to help assist with security incidents that may occur at local government entities. So I'm sharing too many things at once here. So Ohio Persistent Cyber Improvement is free training that you can sign up for your agency. They provide 3 tiers. The first one will be general awareness for all staff. The second is more in-depth and detailed for technical staff, and separate, training based on role for agency administrators and decision makers. At that second tier, they'll actually meet with you to review your plan and make recommendations to you for like, hey, here's something that's missing. Here's what you're doing well. Here's how you can test. It just ask you those questions from that expert perspective to help you develop and mature your plan. And then the third tier, after you have completed those first 2, would actually be to come back and help you conduct tabletop exercise and rehearse your response in a security incident. This is a very valuable service. It's completely free and it is booked for a while. I would just emphasize, please do sign up now so you'll be on their list and be able to take advantage of that. Several Ohio libraries have participated already and have given good feedback. TechCred is a program of the state of Ohio. It reimburses Ohio employers, including libraries, for the cost of training leading to certification for employees. Again, many libraries have used this. Highly recommend. E-rate category 2, this is probably the biggest bang for your buck. This will discount up to 85% of the cost of replacing your internal network equipment, including structured network cabling, and it covers installation and even maintenance. So we've got a good bit of guidance about this on our website. My colleague Christine Morris will provide free training and support with this. If this is a real need for you, but you absolutely do not have the administrative capacity to tackle another, filing project, you can hire a consultant to do all of the paperwork on your behalf. Again, if this not only is outside of your capacity for time, but it's also something where you would really need some guidance, some technical guidance about what to buy, this should be of interest to you. The State Library of Ohio and SEO are collaborating on a grant. It will open next year, and it will assist public libraries by providing, covering the cost of a professional assessment of your network equipment that'll come back with a recommendation for what you need to replace and what you might need. And then SEO will assist you with filing for that E-rate category 2 funding to replace your equipment. You don't have to be a member of SEO to participate in this. They're just organizing and spearheading the project. And you will be able to select your preferred technology solutions and your local vendor, if you have one, to support that project. And then finally, Cyber Ohio, they do have funding from the federal government to award through a cybersecurity software and services grant. It is not open right now. They do expect to reopen it. It will cover up to $20,000 per library towards the cost of very specific list of security software, and expect more information to come about that when it reopens. Finally, some free resources available from OPLIN. Cisco Umbrella DNS filtering. We have a license of Cisco Umbrella for every Ohio public library. We're going to continue providing that whether you are using it or not. DNS security filtering is one of the biggest solutions that you can leverage for just a huge amount of impact with very little implementation effort. Essentially, this is preventing malicious domains from ever loading in your library's network. If you apply it at the whole network level, you're not only protecting the library's devices, you're protecting patron devices while they're connected to your network. If you're not sure that you have an account or whether it's set up, reach out to us as support. We'll be happy to help. We've added a security mailing list for peer information sharing. It'll have private archives, so that information you share there will not be searchable online or available to anyone who's not a list member. OPLIN participates in CISA's cyber hygiene service and MS ISAC vulnerability reports. So if your library has some public IPs and you have some equipment with public facing vulnerabilities, you will likely get an email from us with a report gathered either by CISA or MS ISAC. Again, OPLIN offers E-rate support and training, DMARC report analyzer if your library manages a domain name that sends email. And also by being connected to OPLIN's network, you receive DDoS mitigation through our upstream internet service provider, ORNet. In the interest of time, I'm just going to skip over this slide, but this is just my way of articulating some of those technical security controls that we didn't get into today and sorting them into 3 maturity tiers. These are absolutely not hard and fast, right? But ultimately, they're all in there. Every security technical guidance that you read may articulate things differently, may emphasize different things, but they're all getting to at the same best practices. So, review this list, ask yourself these questions about your library's IT environment and technical controls, and this might prompt you with some ideas of things to say, oh, we already do that. Let's give ourselves credit for this. Or, hey, we haven't considered this. Maybe we need to consider addressing or deploying this control in our environment. Finally, my takeaway for Ohio public libraries would be encouraged. This sounds like a lot, and it is a lot, but public libraries are already concerned with, we have our foundation is digital literacy. We're concerned with patron privacy. These are all topics that are already on our radar. So you're in much better shape than many small local government agencies when it comes to starting a security program. I would encourage you to commit to realistic goals in your initial plan. Keep in mind that once you adopt it, you're auditable for what you've put in that program. So plan to grow over time. Don't make your policy be aspirational. Make it reflect what you're doing now. But at the same time, in parallel, keep that action plan and work toward it. Implement additional controls over time. Add them to your policy as they're completed. Leverage some of these free resources and funding opportunities. Work with your external partners, your service providers, anybody that you have a contract with, and the folks at OPLIN, at the State Library of Ohio, at your consortium, at your MSP, at the Ohio Library Council. All of us are invested in your success and have resources to help you plan and enhance your security controls. And I would encourage you to share your successes, challenges, and experiences with your peers to help them as well. So finally, if there's anything that we can do for you, whether it's just offering a second opinion or sharing resources or helping with any step of your process, please do reach out to us at OPLIN, the Ohio Public Library Information Network, and we would love to help in any way that we can. Thank you for your time and attention today. I appreciate it.